On May 7, 1915, the RMS Lusitania, marvel of Edwardian engineering and the fastest liner on Earth, disappeared beneath the surface of the Celtic Sea. But the true mystery of the Lusitania isn't simply that she was lost. It is the physics-defying speed of her destruction. Consider the data. The Titanic, fatally wounded with 5 watertight compartments breached, took 2 hours and 40 minutes to succumb to the Atlantic. The Lusitania, struck by a single German torpedo, capsized and vanished in just 18 minutes. Naval architecture dictates that a ship of this displacement, boasting this degree of transverse compartmentalization, should have survived the initial impactor at the very least, remained afloat long enough for an orderly evacuation. Yet, witnesses described a second, catastrophic detonation from deep within the hull moments after the torpedo struck, a blast that history has never fully explained. This is the story of the RMS Lusitania and the structural and strategic anomalies that sealed her fate. We will dissect how she was designed and why she failed. To understand why the Lusitania sank so violently, we must first understand the geopolitical chess game that birthed her. By the early 1900s, the North Atlantic was more than a shipping lane. It was the primary theater for a technological arms race between Britain and a rising imperial Germany. German liners, like the Kaiser Wilhelm der Große, were snatching the blue ribbon for the fastest Atlantic crossing, bruising British maritime pride and threatening their commercial dominance. But the Admiralty in London saw a darker threat. They feared that in the event of war, these fast German liners could be rapidly converted into armed merchant cruisers, preying on British supply lines. Britain needed an answerer ship fast enough to outrun any cruiser and large enough to dominate the passenger trade. Enter the Cunard Line. Unable to finance such massive vessels alone, Cunard struck a secret deal with the British government. The Admiralty would provide a low-interest loan of £2.6 million, equivalent to nearly £300 million today, and an annual operating subsidy. In exchange, the Lusitania was built to rigid military specifications. She wasn't just a hotel, she was a reserve warship. Her blueprints included hardened mountings for 12 6-inch guns, hidden beneath the promenade decks. Though the guns were never physically installed during her passenger service, the structural reinforcement remained. More importantly, the Admiralty dictated her survivability standards. She was designed with 12 transverse watertight bulkheads, supposedly making her unsinkable by the standards of the day. The logic was sound. Even if 2 adjoining compartments were flooded, the ship would remain stable. However, the pursuit of speed compromised these defensive layouts. To achieve the contractually obligated 25 knots, the hull form had to be slender and packed with propulsion machinery. This necessity forced designers to push the coal storage to the periphery of the hull, creating longitudinal bunkers. This decision, driven by the need for speed and efficiency in a warship-liner hybrid, would prove to be the critical architectural flaw. When war finally broke out in 1914, the Lusitania remained in civilian service, but she carried the DNA of a warship. She was hauling contraband munitions, rifle cartridges, and shell casings, listed on her manifest as cheese or furs, believing her speed was her armor. The Admiralty's doctrine was clear: speed is safety. But in the murky waters south of Ireland, facing the new asymmetrical threat of the U-boat, speed would become irrelevant, and her internal design would turn against her. To propel 31,000 tons of steel at 25 knots required a propulsion system that bordered on science fiction for 1907. When we strip away the Art Deco staterooms and the promenade decks, we find that the Lusitania was essentially a massive floating power station wrapped in a riveted steel skin. At her heart lay a revolutionary gamble, the steam turbine. Unlike the reciprocating piston engines of the Titanic, which thumped and vibrated, the Lusitania utilized direct-drive Parsons turbines. These massive cylindrical rotors spun at hundreds of revolutions per minute, harnessing the kinetic energy of high-pressure steam to generate a staggering 68,000 shaft horsepower. This power was delivered to 4 massive bronze propellers, driving the ship with a smoothness and speed previously unimagined. But these turbines were voracious beasts. To feed them, the Lusitania required an elaborate respiratory system occupying the majority of her lower decks. If we look at this longitudinal cross-section, we can see the scale of the operation. 4 massive boiler rooms housed 25 double-ended and single-ended Scotch marine boilers. These operated at 195 pounds per square inch of pressure. To keep this pressure constant, a black gang of over 300 trimmers and firemen shoveled nearly 1,000 tons of coal a day into the furnaces. It is here, in the storage of this coal, that we find the ship's most critical engineering compromise. In a standard merchant ship, coal bunkers are typically arranged transversely, running across the width of the ship. This means that as coal is consumed, the ship remains relatively balanced. However, because the Lusitania was designed to Admiralty specifications as an auxiliary cruiser, her designers prioritized the protection of her vitals over stability and flooding. They utilized longitudinal coal bunkers. As this 3D cross-section reveals, the coal storage was placed along the sides of the hull, flanking the boiler rooms. The engineering logic was military. A layer of coal, several feet thick, would act as makeshift armor, absorbing the impact of enemy shell fire and protecting the delicate boilers and steam lines within. But against a torpedo, this armor became a trap. If the outer hull were breached, water would rush into these long, narrow wing bunkers on just one side of the ship. The longitudinal bulkhead, the inner wall of the bunker, would prevent that water from flowing evenly across the width of the hull. Instead of the ship settling deeper into the water on an even keel, the weight of the water would be concentrated entirely on the starboard, or port side. This would create an immediate, severe list. Furthermore, the sheer size of the machinery spaces meant that the watertight compartments were enormous. While she had transverse bulkheads designed to seal off flooding, the longitudinal bunkers undermined the entire safety system. The moment water entered those side bunkers, the Lusitania was no longer a stable platform. She was a pendulum waiting to tip over. The engineering was a masterclass in speed and a failure in damage control. She was a ship designed to fight a surface war with cruisers, where shells strike above the waterline. She was completely unprepared for the physics of a subsurface detonation that would utilize her own internal geography against her. May 7th, 1915, 2:10 p.m. The Lusitania is 11 miles off the old head of Kinsale. The weather is clear, the sea calm. Captain William Turner, believing he has navigated the most dangerous stretch of the exclusion zone, is preparing to alter course for Queenstown. Beneath the surface, however, the geometry of an intercept is already locked in. Kapitän Lieutenant Walter Schwieger, commanding U-20, spots the 4 funnels on the horizon. He doesn't need to hunt the liner. The Lusitania is steaming directly across his bow. He orders a single G6 torpedo to be fired. Running at a depth of 3 meters and a speed of 35 knots, the weapon covers the 700-yard distance in less than 40 seconds. The torpedo strikes the starboard side, just aft of the bridge, between the first and second funnels. The warhead, packed with 290 pounds of hexanite, detonates on contact. The explosion punches a hole in the steel plating, instantly flooding the starboard coal bunker. On any other liner, This would be a survivable wound. The watertight doors would close, the ship would list slightly, but she would hold. But then, the anomaly occurs. Seconds after the initial impact, a second, far more massive explosion erupts from deep within the ship's belly. Witnesses describe a column of steam, water, and debris shooting 160 feet into the air, higher than the funnels themselves. The ship shudders violently, as if her keel has snapped. This second blast is the death knell. Inside the hull, the catastrophe accelerates at a terrifying velocity. The longitudinal bunkers, designed to protect the boilers, now become the instrument of the ship's destruction. Thousands of tons of seawater rush exclusively into the starboard wing compartments. Because the longitudinal bulkheads hold the water on the starboard side, preventing it from flowing across to the port side, the Lusitania immediately lists 15 degrees to starboard. This severe angle renders the ship's safety systems useless. In the engine room, chaos reigns. The steam lines have been severed. The main steam pressure gauge drops to 0 instantly. The turbines spin down. The hydraulic power, essential for reversing the engines to brake the ship, is lost. This creates a deadly hydrodynamic scenario. The Lusitania is still traveling forward at 18 knots, unable to stop. As she plows through the ocean, the hole in her side acts like a massive scoop, forcing water into the hull at incredible pressure.
It's sliding. I
The
can't hold
forward
it.
momentum
Grab the rail.
drives the ship under. On the boat deck, the mechanical consequences of the list become horrific. The lifeboats are designed to be lowered from a ship on an even keel. At a 15-degree list, the port-side boats swing inward, crashing against the deckhouses and becoming impossible to launch. On the starboard side, the boats swing out so far that the gap between the gunwale and the boat is terrifyingly wide. When the crew attempts to lower them, the heavy chain-wheel davits become difficult to control. Boats spill their occupants or crash onto the lower decks. By 2:25 p.m., just 15 minutes after impact, the list has increased to 25 degrees. The ship is no longer a vessel. It is a sliding steel cliff. The bow submerges. The stern rises, exposing the massive bronze propellers to the air. The internal stresses are now exceeding the structural limits of the rivets. We can hear the groan of twisting metal as the internal bulkheads collapse under the weight of the water. At 2:28 p.m., the bow strikes the seabed, 300 feet below, while the stern is still visible above the waves. The ship pivots around the point of impact, twists, and disappears. In 18 minutes, the pride of the Cunard line has been erased. 1,198 lives are lost. But as the survivors cling to wreckage in the cold Celtic Sea, the question that will haunt the next century is already forming. The torpedo struck the coal bunker. But what caused the second explosion? For over a century, the second explosion has fueled conspiracy theories. Was the Lusitania secretly carrying high explosives for the British war effort? Did a clandestine cargo of munitions detonate, dooming the ship and its passengers? Our analysis suggests the answer is less conspiratorial, but far more technically damning. While the Lusitania was indeed carrying millions of rounds of .303 rifle ammunition and shrapnel shell casings, forensic burn tests indicate these materials do not mass detonate with the velocity required to tear a liner apart. Rifle cartridges tend to pop individually rather than explode in unison. If the munitions were the culprit, the destruction would have been prolonged and localized, not the singular, hull-shattering event witnesses described. The true assassin likely lay in the fuel itself. When the torpedo penetrated the starboard coal bunker, the shock wave would have pulverized the coal stored there, instantly filling the confined space with a dense, highly volatile cloud of coal dust. When ignited by the torpedo's warhead, this suspension acts like a thermobaric weapon fuel-air explosive. This hypothesis aligns with the forensic evidence found on the wreck. The damage is consistent with a massive internal overpressure event that blew out the bottom of the hull. Alternatively, or perhaps concurrently, we must consider a steam explosion. Cold seawater rushing into the superheated environment of the boiler rooms could have caused the boilers to rupture with catastrophic force. Ultimately, the specific chemical agent of the second explosion matters less than the architectural failure that amplified it. The Lusitania's unsinkable reputation relied on the assumption of surface warfare. Her longitudinal coal bunkers, designed to stop shells, trapped the floodwater on one side. This created a moment of inertia that capsized the ship before the lifeboats could be launched. The Lusitania was not destroyed by a conspiracy. She was destroyed by a design philosophy that prioritized speed and armor over stability, failing to anticipate the lethal physics of the torpedo age. The sinking of the Lusitania marked the violent end of the Edwardian dream. It shattered the illusion that civilian liners were exempt from the brutality of total war. In the cold mathematics of naval engineering, we learned that nature respects neither luxury nor reputation. Against the unforgiving mechanics of the sea, even the fastest ship on Earth could not outrun her own design flaws.